Ladies and gentlemen, when we think about weddings, we often imagine flowers, vows, and music. We imagine two people joining together, surrounded by family and friends, celebrating love. But a wedding, when you look deeper, is not just about two individuals. It's about what it represents to humanity. It's about the way commitment, unity, and shared purpose can become a force larger than any single person. Now imagine a wedding that is not simply a private occasion, but one that sparks imagination across the world. A wedding that makes people stop, pause, and consider what it truly means to dedicate oneself, not only to another human being, but to a vision of the future. And when we look at this possibility through the lens of neuroscience, psychology, and human behavior, we see something extraordinary. The human brain is wired to find meaning in symbolic acts. Rituals shape us, they anchor us, and they project us forward. They are not just celebrations, they are neurological resets, moments when society's shared narrative takes a new turn. Why does this matter? Because the mind does not merely respond to events. It responds to the stories those events carry. Neuroscientific studies show that when we encounter moments rich in symbolism, marriages, births, deaths, turning points, we experience heightened neural synchronization. Our brains literally align with one another's, allowing us to share a collective emotional state. This is why watching a wedding, even of people we have never met, can still bring us to tears. We are empathic creatures. We resonate with symbols of love and unity because, at our deepest level, we are designed to connect. So imagine this, a global audience watching a wedding that is not only about love, but about hope, resilience, and the courage to imagine beyond limits. A wedding where the symbolism is amplified, where millions see not just a couple but a statement. That even in a world filled with division, conflict, and uncertainty, it is possible to build bridges of trust and shared dreams. That kind of symbolism activates something far greater than personal admiration. It activates neural circuits of aspiration, circuits that light up when we dare to envision better versions of ourselves. History has shown us this many times. When John F. Kennedy and Jacqueline Bouvier married, it was not just another union. It became a cultural moment that inspired Americans to think about youth, vitality, and the promise of new leadership. When Princess Diana walked down the aisle, billions watched, not only because of royalty, but because the spectacle became an archetype of fairy tale romance in a world craving hope. These weddings mattered not only to those involved, but to millions who felt their own lives subtly shaped by the event's narrative. But here is where things become even more profound. Neuroscience teaches us that the human brain thrives on models, examples that guide behavior. We call this observational learning, or in simpler terms, mirror neuron activation. When we watch others achieve, commit, or dream, our own neural pathways rehearse the same actions. A child watching a parent solve a problem learns not just the answer, but the very method of problem solving. An adult watching someone take a bold step feels their own sense of courage reinforced. Weddings, then, are not just personal choices, they are live models of unity, perseverance, and vulnerability in action. They demonstrate that no matter how powerful or successful someone may be, love still requires humility. It requires listening, compromise, and openness. And when millions see this modeled at once, it can change the collective psyche. Now, think about this through the lens of a wedding that would already be under the global spotlight. The details, where it happens, who attends, how it unfolds, are less important than the psychological reverberations it sends. At a time when loneliness is at epidemic levels, when digital screens often substitute for human touch, when depression and anxiety rise because people feel disconnected, such a moment could remind us of something essential, that the most meaningful journeys are never walked alone. Love, commitment, and shared dreams are not weaknesses. They are the very foundations of human flourishing. Scientific data supports this. Studies from Harvard's 85 long adult development projects show that the greatest predictor of human happiness is not wealth, fame, or professional achievement. It is close relationships. The simple, profound truth is that those who feel deeply connected live longer, healthier, and more fulfilling lives. A globally significant wedding amplifies this truth in a way statistics alone cannot. It paints the picture in real time. It allows millions to feel, even briefly, that connection is possible, that unity is worth striving for. But let us go deeper. Why does such an event capture imagination at scale? The answer lies in the brain's reward system. When people witness commitment, loyalty, and love, their dopamine pathways activate. These are the same pathways that drive motivation, persistence, and creativity. In essence, witnessing love does not merely make us smile, it re-energizes our will to act, to create, to believe in possibility. And when the figures involved are people already associated with vision, innovation, or bold change, the effect compounds. The story becomes not only about romance, but about the convergence of personal and collective destiny. This is why the psychology of weddings at this scale becomes a blueprint for society. They remind us that progress without love is hollow, and love without vision is fragile. But when love and vision combine, when human connection fuses with a larger mission, the ripple effects become unstoppable. Let me share a scientific insight here. There's a concept in neuroscience known as emotional contagion. It describes the way emotions spread through groups, almost like viruses. If you've ever walked into a room where everyone was laughing and found yourself smiling without knowing why, you've experienced this. The same applies to larger scales, crowds, cities, even nations. And in today's connected world, where billions can tune in to a single event simultaneously, the scale of emotional contagion is unprecedented. A wedding infused with meaning and inspiration does not just affect those present. It transmits hope, unity, and courage to every screen, every household, every person open enough to feel it. We underestimate how much humanity craves this. In an era of fragmentation, where tribalism and division dominate headlines, we yearn for moments that remind us of our shared humanity. We yearn for proof that love is not an illusion, but a force strong enough to unite even the most extraordinary individuals. And when the story is framed not as spectacle, but as symbol, when it is carried with humility, vulnerability, and authenticity, it becomes transformative. The anthropologist Joseph Campbell once spoke of the hero's journey, the timeless pattern where individuals leave the ordinary world, face trials, and return transformed. Marriage, in many ways, is the ultimate hero's journey shared by two people. It is the decision to face life's trials together, to merge strengths and vulnerabilities, to create something larger than oneself. When people see this archetype lived out by figures who already embody boldness and imagination, they find a mirror for their own lives. They begin to believe that their own journeys, too, can hold meaning. And so, a wedding of this magnitude is not just a union of two hearts. It becomes a map showing that love is not contrary to ambition, but essential to it. A map showing that no matter how advanced technology becomes, our deepest needs remain profoundly human. A map showing that the future is not built on machines or rockets alone, but on the trust and tenderness between people. Ladies and gentlemen, in a few years, perhaps even sooner than we expect, when the world pauses to witness such a wedding, I believe it will remind millions of something they had almost forgotten. That love is not simply a private luxury, but a public necessity. That progress is not measured only in inventions or achievements, but in the ability to carry one another forward. That the most powerful statement any of us can make is not, "I alone can achieve," but together we can endure, create, and dream. And yet, the beauty of such moments is not only in the spectacle itself, but in what happens afterward. The day of celebration eventually fades, the flowers wilt, the music quiets, but the symbolic residue remains. The collective memory of humanity holds on to it, and that memory becomes a reference point. People will say, "I remember where I was when I saw that," and in recalling it, they will also recall the emotions it stirred in them, the sense of hope, the desire to connect, the urge to live with more openness. This is where neuroscience intersects with culture. Memory is not simply a static storage of facts. It is a living process, continuously reshaped by how we recall it. When millions recall a shared event, they are not merely remembering. They are reinforcing and reinterpreting the meaning. Over time, such memories become cultural anchors. They turn into myths, into collective narratives that transcend the original moment. The wedding may last one day, but its resonance may last decades, echoing into the choices people make about love, family, purpose, and even the courage to commit to something larger than themselves. Let us consider what happens within the brain at a biochemical level. When humans experience awe, which weddings at great scale often evoke, they release oxytocin, sometimes called the bonding hormone. This molecule not only strengthens emotional connection, it also promotes generosity and trust. Experiments have shown that when oxytocin levels rise, people are more willing to cooperate, to forgive, to empathize. Imagine the effect of millions of viewers simultaneously experiencing an oxytocin surge while watching such a wedding. That shared biochemical shift can, quite literally, make the world kinder, if only for a time. And sometimes those moments are all it takes to shift trajectories, to make people reconsider their relationships, to inspire someone to reach out to a friend they've drifted from, to rekindle trust where it was once lost. And there is another dimension to this inspiration. We often think of inspiration as fleeting, but neurologically, inspiration creates lasting imprints. A study from the University of Rochester showed that when people feel inspired, they are more likely to adopt long-term goals and pursue them with perseverance. Weddings at this level of visibility are powerful triggers of inspiration, not because of wealth or grandeur, but because they represent human vulnerability embraced openly. To stand before the world and say, "I choose love, I choose partnership," is an act of immense courage. That courage ripples outward, teaching millions that vulnerability is not weakness, but strength. We must not forget that for all our advances, our rockets, our artificial intelligence, our astonishing leaps in biotechnology, the greatest challenge humanity faces is not technological, but relational. Can we live together peacefully? Can we cooperate across borders, beliefs, and cultures? Can we sustain families, friendships, and communities in an age of distraction and division? These questions are not answered in laboratories. They are answered in living rooms, in conversations, in promises kept between two people. A wedding, then, is not simply personal, it is civilizational. It models the very skills humanity must master if we are to survive and thrive: trust, compromise, shared vision. And yet, I know some may ask, but why focus on one wedding? Aren't there millions happening every day? And that is true. Love is celebrated in countless homes, in villages, in cities, often without attention. Those moments are no less meaningful. In fact, they are the bedrock of society. But when the world pays attention to one, it becomes a magnifying glass. It amplifies what already exists in the private sphere and brings it into the collective imagination. Just as a single story told in the right moment can ignite a movement, a single wedding, visible to the globe, can remind us of truths that many had buried under cynicism or fatigue. Let me share an example from history. In the 1940s, at the height of global war and despair, newsreels often showed soldiers returning home to marry. Those images, broadcast to millions, were not simply about personal joy. They became symbols of resilience, of hope that life could continue even in the face of devastation. They inspired people to endure, to rebuild. That is the power of symbolic acts, magnified by visibility. It is not the event alone. It is the story the event tells about who we are and what we can become. And this is why a wedding of extraordinary scale has the potential to inspire millions today. Because our modern world is marked by paradox. We are more connected than ever, yet more isolated than ever. We can communicate across oceans instantly, yet often fail to listen to the person sitting beside us. Rates of loneliness are climbing, and loneliness is not merely emotional, it is deadly. Research from Brigham Young University has shown that chronic loneliness increases mortality risk to the same degree as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. This is the silent epidemic of our time. And what is the antidote to loneliness? Connection. Real, authentic, vulnerable connection. A wedding, seen and felt by millions, becomes a broadcasted antidote. It reminds us what connection looks like, what it feels like, and why it matters. But let us not idealize. A marriage, like any human commitment, is not without challenges. And herein lies another source of inspiration. For when two individuals, even those under immense public scrutiny, choose to navigate life together, they show that imperfection is not a barrier to love, but part of it. They remind us that relationships are not sustained by perfection, but by resilience. And resilience is one of the most critical traits humanity must cultivate, not only in marriages, but in every sphere of existence. To see resilience modeled in the context of love is to see the blueprint for resilience in society. This brings us to the role of storytelling. Every great wedding becomes a story retold in articles, in conversations, in memories. And stories are not just entertainment, they are the currency of meaning in human life. Neuroscience shows that when we hear a story, our brains release cortisol and oxytocin in tandem. Cortisol focuses our attention, oxytocin builds empathy. Together, they lock the lesson into our memory. So when the story of such a wedding is told, about love, about unity, about shared dreams, it is not just a narrative, it is a neurological experience that shapes how people think, feel, and act. Now, imagine the children who will grow up hearing about such a wedding. For them, it will not be a spectacle of fame, but a myth of love. And myths matter. Myths are the patterns that give life meaning. When children hear stories of courage, they learn to be brave. When they hear stories of love, they learn to open their hearts. The story of such a wedding, if carried with sincerity and humility, can become one of those myths that guide generations. But perhaps the deepest reason this matters is because of what it says about humanity itself. For all our progress, our exploration of space, our conquest of diseases, our reshaping of technology, we are still creatures of love. We are still creatures who long for connection, who find joy in companionship, who thrive in the presence of trust. A wedding reminds us of this primal truth. And when the wedding belongs to someone who symbolizes vision, ambition, or human progress, the reminder is doubly powerful that no matter how far we reach outward, our true strength comes from the bonds we nurture inward. Ladies and gentlemen, as we stand on the cusp of an age defined by artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and interplanetary exploration, it might seem strange to pause and reflect on a wedding, but perhaps it is precisely in this contrast that we find wisdom. For technology may shape the future, but it is love that gives the future purpose. Without love, technology becomes machinery without meaning. With love, technology becomes an extension of human flourishing. And so, when millions pause to witness such a wedding, I believe they will not merely be watching two people, they will be witnessing themselves, their hopes, their dreams, their vulnerabilities mirrored on a global stage. And in that reflection, perhaps they will find the courage to choose love in their own lives. Because that, ultimately, is what inspiration does. It transforms spectators into participants. A wedding witnessed on a global stage is not simply a performance to be consumed. It is an invitation. It invites every person watching to consider their own relationships, their own commitments, their own capacity for vulnerability and strength. It invites reflection on what we choose to value, on what we are willing to fight for, and on we wish to walk beside through the unpredictable journey of life. Neuroscientists often speak of the plasticity of the human brain, its ability to change, adapt, and rewire in response to experiences. Inspiration is one of the greatest catalysts of plasticity. When a moment strikes us deeply, when it shakes us emotionally, our brain does not remain the same. New connections are formed, old patterns are revised, dormant pathways are reawakened. A wedding at such a scale, filled with symbolism, awe, and authenticity, is precisely the kind of moment that catalyzes change. It creates neural imprints that ripple through lives long after the vows have been spoken. But this is not only about neuroscience, psychology, or cultural symbolism. It is also about what it means to be human at the deepest level. Every society, across history and geography, has elevated the act of marriage as sacred. Why? Because it represents the merging of two narratives into one. It is the moment when the I becomes we, and the strength of a society, at its core, depends on the strength of those the families, the friendships, the partnerships that create stability, nurture children, and pass down values. A wedding is not just two people choosing love, it is two people choosing to contribute to the fabric of humanity. And in today's world, where division often dominates our attention, we need examples of unity more than ever. Not unity born of sameness, but unity born of choice. To choose one another in spite of differences, in spite of imperfections, in spite of the inevitable struggles, that is the essence of true love. And when this choice is modeled on a stage that the entire world is watching, it offers a vision of what is possible not just in personal relationships, but in communities, in nations, in our shared future. There is a profound lesson here about vulnerability. To marry publicly, under the gaze of millions, is to stand unguarded in a way that few are willing to. It is to say, this is who I am, with all my strengths and flaws, and I choose to share it with another. And vulnerability, contrary to what many believe, is not a weakness. It is the birthplace of connection, of courage, of resilience. The neuroscientist Antonio Damasio once wrote that we are not thinking machines that feel, but feeling machines that think. Our emotions guide our decisions more than logic alone, and our willingness to embrace vulnerability is what allows us to experience the fullness of life. A wedding, especially one magnified to global attention, reminds us of this truth with undeniable clarity. Now, let us imagine the ripple effects. Imagine a young couple struggling to decide whether love is worth the risk, watching this event and finding the courage to say yes. Imagine an estranged family, divided by conflict, watching and remembering what unity once felt like, deciding to reach out and reconcile. Imagine a lonely individual, convinced that connection is beyond their reach, seeing the celebration and realizing that love is still possible. These are not abstract fantasies. They are the very real psychological consequences of witnessing love modeled in ways that resonate deeply. And beyond the personal level, consider the societal impact. Weddings have always carried political, cultural, and even economic symbolism. Royal weddings once symbolized alliances between nations. Public marriages often symbolized continuity, stability, or change. Today, in a world facing climate challenges, geopolitical tensions, and technological disruption, a wedding of great visibility can symbolize something profoundly needed. The reminder that our greatest resource is not money, not power, not machines, but the human capacity to connect, to trust, and to dream together. This, I believe, is why millions will be inspired. Not because of wealth or spectacle, not because of fame or grandeur, but because deep down, every human heart longs for proof that love endures. We long to see it lived out before us. We long for reminders that even in a world filled with uncertainty, there are still choices rooted in courage, in tenderness, in hope. A wedding, lived openly, offers that proof in its purest form. And perhaps that is the true lesson such a moment will give to the world, that progress and innovation, while vital, must always be grounded in love. Without love, our inventions are directionless. Without love, our achievements feel hollow. Without love, even the grandest visions for the future lose their meaning. But with love, every step forward becomes purposeful. With love, every sacrifice gains context. With love, the future becomes not just survivable, but beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, one day, perhaps soon, we may find ourselves pausing to witness a wedding that captures the imagination of the entire world. When that day comes, let us not dismiss it as mere spectacle. Let us see it for what it truly is, a mirror, reflecting back to us our deepest needs and our greatest hopes. Let us allow it to remind us of what truly matters, not the accumulation of things, but the building of bonds. Not the perfection of the self, but the union with another. Not isolation, but connection. And when the vows are spoken, when the music plays, when millions feel their hearts swell with joy and awe, let us carry that feeling into our own lives. Let us be inspired to love more openly, to forgive more readily, to commit more deeply. Let us allow the symbolism of that day to transform not only the lives of two people, but the lives of millions, each choosing, quietly, bravely, beautifully, to build their own stories of love. For in the end, what will define humanity is not the rockets we launch, the machines we build, or the wealth we accumulate. What will define us is how fiercely we loved, how courageously we connected, how faithfully we walked beside one another through the unknown. And a wedding, especially one that resonates across the globe, will always stand as a testament to this truth. So let us not underestimate it. Let us not see it as a fleeting distraction. Let us see it as inspiration, as proof, as a reminder. Because love is the one force that, when chosen with sincerity, truly has the power to inspire millions and to carry humanity into a future worth living. Thank you.